Good morning. Welcome to Your Launry Unfolded.
Oh my goodness.
You're okay. It happens.
Everything was so perfect.
Yep, that's how it goes. That's why I love my podcast. It's all about not being perfect and stuff happens. Isn't that great?
What the heck?
Oh, too funny.
Let's see if we can make this behave. What is stressing you out there? There we go.
Too funny. What were you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, all right, your first name, Ambika?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I should send you a gift. Seriously.
I was like, is it Ambika? Ambika
no,
sounds more. Yeah.
English speakers tend to say Ambika, but that's because they stress that second or middle vowel.
Okay.
And it's a Sanskrit name. And so usually what occurs is the last vowel is long, sometimes the first. So it's actually short A, short I, long A. So Ambika would be the proper, but Ambika is perfect for English speaker.
Good. I got a gold star for the day.
Oh my gosh. No, like 6 of them. That's amazing, so, Wendy.
How do you do your last name then? Is it
Devi, like Davy Jones?
Oh, Devi. Oh, perfect.
Yeah, Devi means goddess. And the name was given to me by a Swami. And there are several variations on the name. And to receive this name is auspicious. And It is the name of the Devi Mahatmya. Now, you might know that word from, we say in English, Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatmya means really big. So she's a version of the Great Mother Goddess. And this particular story that tells her story, because that's part of when you receive a name, you have to go research it and learn all about why you were given this name by a Swami. We don't really say guru until after the person is out of their body. But in English speakers and Westerners tend to do some funny things with the protocols.
Interesting.
So, yeah. And so her story is quite interesting. And in a nutshell, what it is she is Mother Nature. And people who know me would say, that makes sense.
Yeah, just a little bit from like your application. I kind of get that too. Very, grounded and with nature. And I see meditation's a big part of your life. And,
oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah. So let's first start out with a bit of your background. So how I like to do it is I like to talk about like your challenges, things from your past that you've had to deal with.
Okay.
And then we'll talk into like the mindset shifts and where things kind of shift for you. And then we'll talk about where you are now and how you found success.
Well, I think the number one, I'm going to start with the end and then we'll go backwards. The major reason and the greatest gift I've received was an encouraging mom. My mother would let me fall down and make mistakes and love me through them and was so incredibly supportive of my creativity. When I was a little kid, in the second house I lived in with my parents, they moved a few times while I was growing up. In that second house, they had a basement and they redid a portion for the family where they entertained and had parties. There was a laundry area. My dad set up a dark room in there and taught me how to do photography. When I was in second grade, I was working the black and white dark room by myself. And we taught my second grade class. It was super cool because the headmistress at my school at the time was really into photography. So that worked. And then there was a room for me. And it became my art and creative space. And they would let me get into things with heat and soldering irons and fire when I was young. So,
my gosh.
I mean, I remember in that house, we had the roof shingled. And Jackson Pollock was a very popular artist at the time. And there were cedar shingles and they smelled so good. And I remember them in the garage. And I loved crayons, and I still do. I still draw with crayons. I think waxy type pastel
Yeah.
and Crayola are just perfect. I love all kinds of color. And
Okay.
I remember sitting in the garage with a candle, melting crayons, and making splatter art on the cedar shingles. So,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, I have all kinds of wild remembrances. And I do my artwork for my book covers. And if the book has art inside, I'm very particular. And I do a
Okay.
lot of the art for my websites.
Hmm.
But I also am learning to give it over to somebody because we don't have time to do everything, you know, but I can conceptualize it really easy. And I feel
Mhm.
like my artist really loves working with me because of this, because
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I can see that.
I'm easy to, you know, do that with.
Right. And I think that's a lot of it too, is if you can explain what you want to see, it's easier for them to create it. My daughter's an artist as well. So I think that's kind of the same thing. And she's very emotionally led when she does art. So she just kind of, that's her therapy. You know, she just really releases all that right into her artwork. So
Oh,
that's,
art is so very therapeutic. I did teach
mhm.
it for a few years.
Oh, wow.
But you wanted to hear about some challenges, right?
Yes. Yeah. So some
Yeah.
things that you had to go through.
Yeah. So when I was very little in first grade, my first grade teacher was having a lot of distress, I'm going to say, to be
Okay.
polite. And she ended up getting fired
Ooh.
like partway through. And actually, it was a good halfway through my
Okay.
first grade year. And I was not learning how to read because I was sitting towards the back of the room and I couldn't see, and nobody had identified that. So I couldn't see the chalkboard. And so that was a real challenge. And my mom was so into books. She was a book leader. And my older brother wanted and aspired to be a writer. And literature was huge in my family. My maternal grandmother lived with us, and she was well read. And I remember her, she was from a foreign country, and she would read a paper from there in what looked like a mystical language to me. And and so it was tough because I wasn't reading well, and they got an invitation for me from a Quaker school.
Hmm.
And the Quaker school was running a pilot program, but the deal was all the first graders who were having trouble in the year I was in would have to come back and do first grade again. And
Oh,
my
wow.
parents explained it to me, and I thought, no big deal. You
Hmm.
know, I wasn't having a good time in that school at all.
Right.
So it was really a no brainer for me to say, yes, I'm in.
Right.
And went to the new school. And I remember the classroom was in an old historic stable, thick
Oh my
stone
God.
walls on this beautiful piece of land that was originally owned by William Penn. It was in Pennsylvania. And there was this
Wow.
magical glen of trees where we would have ceremonies like maypole dancing and graduation ceremonies. And my little stable where I went to first grade was right off of that, where the main school was further away and across the street. And
Wow.
the meeting house, which was an ancient Quaker meeting house, was on the same part of the property. So my little first grade group would walk over to the meeting house every Wednesday morning and
Hmm.
sit quietly with the entire school, kindergarten through sixth grade.
Hmm.
There were higher students, but they had their own meeting.
Oh,
And actually, they might have actually been in that meeting, but we were in the section with my class, first to sixth graders. And we sat silently. Can you imagine all those kids sitting silently for
wow.
an hour? For an hour. So I attribute my learning of sitting still and patience to my artwork, and also to that was really my first introduction to meditation. And
Wow.
then a yoga instructor who then became much higher up, has his own yoga center, came to the school with his American students and did yoga in the Glen one day for our maypole celebration. So we were in white, they were in white, and they're doing yoga to classical music. They used to have this old, it looked like a Victrola, you know, with the big
Okay.
horn.
Yeah.
And they would play music. I can still remember the sound of the graduation
Oh,
song,
wow.
you know. And I turned to the first grader next to me because it was May Day,
Hmm.
and we had big sisters behind us who were 12th graders. And my first grade friend, I said, I'm going to do that, watching the yogis. And I remember saying that. Now, as I got a little bit older, and I continued on in that school through fifth grade, but in second grade, I became a safety. So I had to cross people in the
Oh, okay.
mornings to get to school, and I would miss spelling. So I
Oh,
was not a good speller at all.
okay.
And then when I got to ninth grade, Wendy, I had a great English teacher who had it out for me. And she told me, face on, you'll never amount to anything because you can't spell. And the same
Oh.
year I got failed, well, with a D in geometry. And I was an advanced math student before I went to this school where I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And another Quaker school, though, with a great meeting
Okay.
house. And so I went to summer school, and the head of the math department was my teacher. And after 2 classes, he said, bring your mom next time. And he said, she should have gotten an A. And he went down on the math teacher because the math
Mm.
teacher was married to the head of the English department. So they were
Oh.
fussing over spelling. Little did they know I would have a spell checker.
Wow.
So with a spell checker, I've learned to actually be a much better editor of my own
Mhm.
work. And I think the more we practice, the more we get into it. And now I have my own books, so
That's awesome.
I've started my own publishing label. So, I tell this story quite often because people that want to hear these kinds of stories,
Mhm.
but you can't, you really can't let this kind of stuff get on you, and you can't weigh yourself down every day with it. And I attribute my ability to pull myself up and say, okay, that was crappy, to my mom, and also one of my teachers who was my first really formal meditation teacher. And he
Okay.
was a monk that I met when he was 103 years old.
Wow.
He lived to be 109.
Oh my gosh.
I wrote
That's
about him in my second book,
incredible.
Unfolding Happiness. So you can read
Okay.
his story as told by me
Wow.
in there. And I remember, we would meditate, and he loved green light. He would shoot green light in the room. It looked like a scene from Close Encounters. And he
What
would
was
bathe us in this.
what was the symbolism with the green light then? Like,
Well, green is the frequency of the heart chakra.
okay.
So it's a harmonic, and people think of it as balancing, but I don't think of these things in 2 dimensions. Balance would mean, like a
Yeah.
seesaw, but how can you describe multi-dimensions like that? So I like to use the word harmony,
Okay.
harmonizing. So
Oh,
when
that
I
makes sense.
teach about chakras, because I do teach
Hmm.
this as a topic, and it will be in the sister book to Unfolding Happiness,
Okay.
which is an introduction to meditation and Ayurveda and some cosmology. Um, I just feel that it makes more sense because chakras actually can move. They can move out of the body even. They're
Oh,
they're not stuck to the spine. And there are some scientists that have come up with some technology which is showing things. Now I don't know. I really can't honestly say, is this truth what they're showing? I mean, they're using
okay.
electronic frequency. And again, that's something from this realm. So, does that make sense in multi dimensions? Maybe, maybe not. But it tells something, it gives
Right.
us some kind of feedback. And I see chakras more like sea anemones, like opening it, like breathing, And
Right.
if you've ever watched sea anemones in the ocean or in a tank,
Hmm.
you can sometimes see them lift up and then they'll move and touch down again. But
Hmm.
they're always kind of flowing with
Okay.
the power and energy of the water. And that's how I feel our energy centers are moving.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. So I can't even imagine then going to this school with all that incredible history, and it's probably like feeling hugged just in the room with just the history surrounding you, and then going through this meditation. And even though you're going through struggles, obviously, with the reading, which my daughter struggled with reading as well, or not reading, but spelling. And so she started reading books, and that's how she learned to spell the best, because she just knew what the words were. And I don't know if it was like a sight word thing that she started to learn, because I helped her read phonetically. But yeah,
Reading wasn't an issue for me. It
the
was
spell.
when I was writing.
Oh, okay.
I became an avid reader in that second round of first
Mhm.
grade, and one of the strongest readers in my class. And I was really into school and learning. I'm a schoolaholic, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's so cool.
it's an addiction.
So yeah, my daughter's that way too. I actually had to ground her from reading when she was naughty because that was the only thing she really prized.
Oh, that had to feel so difficult
It
to
was so
say,
bizarre.
"Don't read." I mean, that seems so counterintuitive.
Yeah, because I mean, I could have taken away TV, toys. She didn't care. Take away the books, and it was full meltdown. So that's how I kind of like balanced. Okay, you gotta clean your room. Okay, no books then.
We had a gigantic, thick dictionary in our dining room when
Wow.
I was growing up, and my mom would get up and look things up, and vocabulary and things like that were always a part of
Mhm.
me. But being able to write it out, but better and better all the time.
Right. And I can imagine. So obviously you're enjoying writing and reading and learning. So when do you realize that that's what you want to do or part of what you want to do when as you're growing older?
I remember the very first book that I read that didn't have big pictures, and
Mm.
that was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And
What a way
it
to
did have
imagine that.
it did have little pictures in the version I had, but it was the first, ominous looking book that I
Right.
picked up, and it was in third grade. And at that point, I also used to swipe Mad Magazine and Mad Magazine books from my brother's room.
Yeah.
And I would draw. I loved Spy versus Spy. I don't know if you ever read Mad Magazine.
Not really here and there. I've seen them, but
there
yeah.
were margin cartoons that it's notorious for. I haven't picked one up in a while, but I would imagine this goes on.
Okay.
And I thought, what a cool thing. So I started in my spiral bound notebooks for school writing poetry and drawing cartoons and things in the margins. And my teacher said, go for it. She didn't mind if I handed in something that had doodles all over it and writing and stories and poetry. She was fine with it. So I feel like she was super encouraging for
Yeah.
that too. And if you look inside my books, you'll kind of get a sense of a little bit of playfulness. Like I like to put some little icons, and I like some imagery, not just plain pages. And my book of poetry, which is The Wizard and the Wrench, has some of my drawings, some drawings of the other author's
Hmm.
great friend who was a very famous graphic novelist,
Wow.
and photography of
Hmm.
mine.
Wow, that's amazing. You can incorporate that all together between the writing, the art. And so when people read your books, I imagine they feel like they're, getting to know you.
I hope so. I mean, that's the whole idea. I truly believe, and this was told to me by my first publisher. I had a publisher before I broke out on my own to
Hmm.
become my own publisher. And there was a little bit of challenge there too. But
Okay.
I do encourage all of my writing. I call them apprentices
Okay.
to become their own publisher. Really, I also worked as a musician for many years, and back in the day, you wanted to get signed by a label, you wanted all of that,
Hmm.
and then when people could get their own recording studios, and then digital recording, and now everything's digital.
Hmm.
Everybody, it's the same with TV. Look at all the
Right.
YouTube channels. Look at all
Yep.
the podcasts. It's the same with radio. And
Hmm.
it's the same now with books. So it really makes a lot more sense to, learn how to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And so
More
that's what I
freedom.
like to teach the writers that I work with,
Right.
and the various artists.
And that's nice because then you have that freedom of expression where sometimes when you're with a publisher, they want to change the name, they want to change the artwork. Oh, this has to be reworded. And
Oh.
there's so much
Or they
yeah.
tell you, no, you can't do that, and or that's going to cost so much money because they're invested in you,
Yeah.
and you want the cover, like with Lilith, with my first book. But don't get me wrong, my first publisher was my writing coach for 10 years
Wow.
before I birthed my first book, and I
Uh,
had been working on it for 3 years before that. I was writing for publications.
mhm.
periodicals and writing astrology columns and
Wow.
ask me columns, and I even wrote under nom de plume. So under I was ghostwriting, I would rewrite other people's stuff. I was writing editorials. I had, I
Oh
think,
my gosh.
7 names for one paper I was writing for.
Holy
Shh,
cow.
not supposed to tell people that, but
Right, right.
yeah. I mean, I remember the busiest week I ever had. That was a monthly, but
Okay.
sometimes, during the week, I would have to go out on location. We were paired up with an FM radio station. So I even was on their street team as another persona representing the paper.
Wow.
So we never put my pictures with my bylines, because
Right.
only selectively, because we didn't want people to find out that I was a guy and I was writing advertorials and I was interviewing dry cleaners, and but
Yeah.
it was crazy. And one week I had to cover 3 sporting events, a lowrider event. I loved those. But the music was usually fun, and I got to meet the
Mhm.
stars.
Oh, that's
A prize fight that the paper bought me the live stream of on TV, and Cinco de Mayo parties. It was
wow.
all in one day. It was crazy. It was
Wow.
crazy. That was the most exhausted I think I've ever been. And I had to make deadline because the prize fight was the last thing, and the deadline was that night
Do you
at
ever
2
have
a.m.
identity crisis in the midst of that? Like, okay, who am I today? Or did you
I
just
was
really?
really careful with my outfits and my hair and, how I showered and showed up.
Hmm.
And press passes. I had, different press passes, and
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
yeah, nobody found out.
I wonder how often that happens for writers who are doing ghostwriting and under these different names. And I wonder how often that happens. It's probably more
Well,
than we
also
think.
if you're writing somebody else's stuff, like when I started really getting serious about studying astrology, I started my own self-training as a teen.
Oh wow.
And then when I went to art school, I did go to art school. Remember, I
Okay.
said I'm a schoolaholic. I have a bunch of college degrees. But the first time I went to college or university,
Mhm.
I met an astrologer who had this little funky kind of holistic food bar, and she did astrology, and I used to go and eat there. I loved her food. It was tiny, very, very tiny, a few tables, a little eating bar. And I just thought she and her husband were so cool. And I decided for my 18th birthday that I would buy myself an astrology chart from a professional and get a consultation with her. And that really got me into it. And then later in my 20s, I met a very famous astrologer named Barbara Shear. We became lifelong friends until she passed on. And I did end up, when websites became the thing, I ended up helping her and ghostwriting a bit for her.
Wow. That's amazing, especially when you get to meet people who, are the person in that field that you're trying to learn from. I mean,
Oh, she was super famous in Berkeley with her husband Jim Shear back in the 60s. Like they were the thing. And then when I was living in Arizona, I met Penny Thornton, and she was Princess Diana's astrologer before Princess Diana was part of the royal family. I went to a workshop with her. I used to frequent this astrology school, and the owner was always trying to get me to sign up. And I was like, oh, please, I need a break from schooling. I
mhm.
totally appreciate this, but I'm really happy coming to these workshops and intensives. I'd love to keep doing that. Well, she talked me into it, because the weekend I took Penny Thornton's, on the day I met her in the morning, she kept putting up pairs of charts, and it was a relationship astrology course. And mind you, I had studied a lot with Barbara. I
Okay.
self-studied a lot on my own. And it was our first day of a series of classes with her. And we were learning relationship astrology. So we played a game at the end of the first morning where she would put up these pairs of charts, and we had to guess who the famous couple was. And I was nailing it. Nailing it. I mean, by the third time, she's looking at me like, who the heck are you? And she came up to me and said, you're taking me to lunch. And I'm like,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
Okay.
Okay.
And so at lunch, she just grilled me. I don't know if you call that grilling. She
kind of picked
Yeah,
your brain and
she
was like,
convinced me. She was convincing me, you've got to go to school. And she said, I really would love to do a consultation for you. And I said, great, I'd love to.
mhm,
She lives in England most of the time, but part-time in Arizona at that time.
okay.
And uh, in my consultation with her, she said, I really think you should go to school because as soon as you're done, I'm pretty sure you're going to work uh, for periodicals and get offers and be on TV. And she was right. Uh,
Wow.
during school, I started being what the Marriott called the shaman in residence. Now, I don't take the term or title shaman lightly, but they did
Uh,
have a chakra meditation garden. I was part of the spa. I worked there for 6 years. I gave tarot card readings and I did
mm,
astrology consultations and also kind of shamanic drumming, chanting,
mm,
meditation sessions for guests and also for employees. And they were affiliated with a TV show called Second Chance, and they had me come on as a relationship expert. So Penny was
wow.
right. And my job with them was to analyze the astrology of two people without
Mhm.
ever meeting them, write a 3-page report on whether I think they could make it as a couple and give it to the producer. And then they did a show and I would do spots in the show. It was a little more hypey on the air, but it was pretty serious
Yeah,
behind the scenes. So like, maybe I'd roll astrology dice or, because it was visual and it was a
yeah,
reality TV show. But
yeah,
they
they gotta keep it
filmed
up.
it at Marriott. So that was pretty cool.
Wow, what a cool opportunity. I mean, just to work with the people you worked with and, to share your gifts and the things that, you've learned, that's just incredible. So, where has that brought you? Obviously, you've had so much success in different areas, which many people don't have success even in one area, and you've got all these different things, which I just find amazing. Um, so, where are you at now, with everything?
I call myself a passionate multipreneur.
Hmm.
Uh, I question myself almost on a daily basis. Does it make sense to have 5 Instagram accounts? Does it make sense to have all the Facebook pages I have? But then some I used to have it all housed in one place.
Okay.
But then some people got a little miffy about it. You can't have astrology with your public speaking career. You can't have writing with your music career. You can't have blah, 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 blah. So I said, okay, last year. And I started to pull apart my main older website, which was still from the newspaper days.
Wow.
I was still using the moniker that I had from that paper. It's still my Gmail, my main Gmail, which
Wow.
how many Gmails do we have now? And
Right? That's a fact.
those for different logins. And so I did decide to take myname.com, which is ambikadevi.com, make
Mhm.
that more like my CV bio, and then
Okay.
link off of it, to a public speaking page, to each book, to the publishing label, to me as an astrologer, and me as what I call a meditation Jedi. So
Okay.
the
Love
expert.
it.
Meditation to me is really why we do yoga. And
Mm,
yoga has become, forgive me, yogis, a stretchy pants exercise program.
yeah.
It's a huge philosophy. I have a master's degree in it.
Mhm.
And I did not, yes, I had to prove certification to a certain level in
Mhm.
yoga instruction for the
Right.
physical, but a good true yoga program teaches you how to do all kinds of internal cleansing. Most of these
Mhm.
programs maybe touch on it. Um, and philosophy, Sanskrit,
Mhm.
reading ancient writings, debating. Uh,
Wow.
there's so much giving of service, being devoted. There's a
Right.
lot to the philosophy, and
Right.
so it is my passion to teach people to meditate. Now, when I think of the word yoga, it equals meditation to me
Right.
because within that it does have sister sciences. The sister
Right.
sciences are Ayurveda, which is for the physical realm, the physical body.
Mhm.
That's become so much more popular with diet. And
Yep.
Then also for the spirit, and most people don't know this, Wendy, but that is astrology.
Oh, see, I didn't connect that either.
Right. So let me explain it in Sanskrit
Okay.
really,
Yeah.
really briefly for you, and it'll make sense. Uh, Ayurveda is for the body.
Okay.
Yoga is for the mind.
Hmm.
Jyotisha is for the spirit. Now, how have
Hmm.
you heard body, mind, spirit before?
Oh yeah, all the
That's
time.
where it came from. Those
Okay.
two, they're sister sciences and they're the daughters of the Vedas, which are the
Okay.
big books of science. And I'll use the word scriptural, but I don't want you to think of it as religious.
Right.
It's ancient writing, it's science, it's the science, it's the cosmic science of life.
Yeah, because I've gotten a little pushback because I had with some friends we were doing some yoga just like through a video for, and it was more for just weight loss, being more flexible, that sort of thing. And I got some people like, nope, I'm a Christian and none of that yoga stuff. That's Satan getting in, and
Wow.
like I had never heard that, so I was so taken back by that. I'm
Yeah,
like,
it's so
no,
unfortunate. That's kind of like saying
yeah,
prayer is a negative word.
right. And so that's where I was at. I'm like, I had never heard that
Yeah,
thought of it. And I'm like, no, and I thought, and I was more like meditation. It's good for your mind, body, soul. Like, so I just was so thrown by that.
yeah, it's most unfortunate
Yeah,
that people misinterpret this so
yeah,
much.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, when what I'd like to say to the people who are on the edge or starting to be more accepting, um, when you're praying, if you're focusing on something and you're focusing the mind, then you're giving the mind an opportunity to be single pointed.
Hmm.
Therefore, you can cut out the extraneous chatter and waves of the mind.
Hmm.
Now, what makes meditation different is that could be a way for you to get into it. That's a launching point. That is
Okay.
not meditating itself. But when you disappear into the action and you lose track of, where am I? Am I sitting in my chair? Am I sitting on somewhere particular on a bench? Am I sitting on a meditation cushion? When you lose track of where, when you lose track of day, like if I went, what day is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Time is, I don't know. Uh, do how old are you? No idea. uh, are you male or female? Absolutely no clue. uh, do you exist? It's irrelevant. So we get attached to these physical bodies. These
Yeah.
are, I call these meat puppets.
That's funny.
Well, it truly is,
Well,
because
it's true.
in the philosophy of yoga, we have layers, and each layer is anchored by a chakra. That's why they can move. Anchors can drift in the sand, right? If you're anchoring a big boat, it's it, hopefully you get it hooked in on a rock and you're not drifting out to sea. But
Right.
uh, these layers are called koshas. Now, you've probably heard the term aura, right?
Yeah. I have a
My
friend who does
aura,
aura reading.
my colors, right? That's the second layer. That's the second kosha.
Okay.
And that relates. So the first is your physical body, or what you believe is your physical body. The second is your emotional body.
Hmm.
It's an emotional layer. Then out from that, your intellectual layer. And these correspond. So I'm now on the third chakra. The fourth chakra, the heart, is your uh, so wait, we went physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and then this would be your cosmic, body.
Yeah.
The chakras here, we don't have effect on them. uh, in order for the energy to move, it has to go on its own. We
Hmm.
can gently urge it, but this area is space, and it's called Vishuddha chakra.
Hmm.
You've probably heard the word mispronounced akasha. You've probably heard people say akasha or akasha,
Mm.
right? It's
Yeah.
akasha. Akasha is space. It's the element of the throat. And what's fascinating about this chakra is the ears are part of it too. And it uses the element of the heart, the air, because that's how we speak. If we didn't breathe, we wouldn't be able to make sound. That's what makes sound in our throat and makes the vocal cords move and creates the
Vibration.
function, right? And so coming up, and space doesn't decompose. All of these elements of the other chakras, earth, water, fire, air, come from space. The
Mm.
space is omnipresent. And
Right.
so when we're speaking and we're saying words, they come out our mouth and they circulate and go back in our ears. That's why it's so important when we're talking about ourselves to be kind,
Mm-hmm. Yep. And listen
and
and
others to be
yes.
kind.
Yes, I firmly believe that.
So I wonder, how could such beautiful science ever be detrimental or seen as negative when in fact so many other things were born out of it,
Right. And I
like
agree.
religions and languages, you know?
Yeah. And it brings people peace. And so how can something bad bring people peace and ground them and help them, kind of expand their mind and, find happiness. So that's where I was really thrown by
Exactly.
the comments.
Yeah, well, brave you, you know? But how could is an aerobics class negative? I mean,
No.
that would be my comeback line. Are
Right.
you afraid of, going to a store that sells athletic wear, or
Right.
that department in a major big store? I mean, is
Right.
origami going to, send you to some sort of nether world? I mean,
Right.
really, I think it's ignorance,
Yeah.
because
And I think that's it too.
when we don't have the whole story and we're believing what other people tell us, wow, you
And I think
know.
that's it, is not being inquisitive and asking different people who have the knowledge, who can help you understand something better. Sometimes I think they put up that wall and they're like, nope, this is what I know. You can't talk to me about it because it's bad, because that's what they've been shown or taught.
Well,
So,
back in the day, I did
mhm,
teach dance and I did teach some different styles of aerobic kind of exercise.
mhm.
And I did find my way into places like gyms. And
Okay.
I was asked to teach yoga classes. And they
Okay.
wanted it taught strictly like an exercise class. And
Right.
I have thousands and thousands of training hours. I have certifications from 5 different schools of yoga. 2 of them are lineages, and you had to go live there for a month to take a course, or
Wow.
months on end. I lived and studied at an ashram. And even the yoga centers where you go, many of them are more like retreat centers. I mean,
Yeah.
this was the real deal. 16 hours of work a day. If you had an
Wow.
hour off, you were taking a shower, studying, doing homework, or face down at plots,
Right.
trying to get some Z's, and then you got up and did it again, then you got up and did it again. Thankfully, they did give us 1 day a week off.
My gosh.
Sometimes you
That's
volunteered for stuff on those days. Super, super intense. And one of the axioms and things I was taught there was no idle time. So I think that circles back to answering, how the heck do you do all this stuff? You're doing
yeah.
artwork, you're making music, you're writing
Yeah.
books. Well, no idle time. And I don't have children. But I'm
Well,
raising all these adults and kids. I do teach
yeah.
11 years and up. I'm teaching at a school of wizardry.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, I wrote a major on the path of meditation to teach psychic arts, because I truly believe we're all born with these gifts. And I also think the reason why that I never doubted it is because my mom never doubted it.
Right.
And the people
Wow.
in my family never said no. So I was
Right.
always encouraged to, oh, if I'm, walking through plants and I see a fairy, draw a picture of it. Sure, why not?
Wow.
I was never told, "Oh, that's not real. That's a fairy tale." I loved it. I remember Greek myths were my favorite thing to be read as a child. I would ask
Wow.
over and over and over for my father to read me from Greek myth book, and I still have a copy of it, both audible, an audiobook, and in my book reader. And
Wow.
I still read that book. And hello, Greek mythology is how we explain the astronomy, which is tropical or the Western style, the Greek and Roman style of
Mhm.
astrology. I also have studied the mythology of the Far East and understand Jyotish, which is what people call Vedic or Vedic astrology.
Oh,
Its true name is Jyotish, Jyotisha, and Jyota means light. Well, when we look up at the sky at night, what do we see? We see lights.
yeah.
And we imagine that's the spiritual realm. So, really, to be into yoga, okay, you've got to practice and study meditation, and you've got to begin to understand your cosmic connection.
Right.
And
Right.
astrology is amazing. I mean, this is how organizations like TM, which is a very huge meditation organization,
Mhm.
through your natal astrology, this is how they choose what mantra to give you because of the placement of the moon when you were born.
Wow. You're like an encyclopedia full of knowledge. Like I'm listening to you, like
Yeah,
you just, it's, you know so
I
much.
hope you're going to need a nap after
Deeply.
this, Wendy.
Right?
Well, that's why my nickname is Yoda.
Right. I can
You'll
see
be the
why.
Yoda. It's like um, I could definitely walk into any yoga school and they could hire me to be part of their teacher training to teach innumerable aspects of philosophy.
Yeah. I
I
can
could
see that.
I
Yeah.
could
Just in,
certainly do the physical stuff. I'm very adamant about teaching. And after teaching in a gym, I realized, you know what? This is dangerous. I don't even like teaching two people. I want to keep my eyes on the one person the entire time because I can
mhm.
be so much more helpful, so much more proactive. Now, with
Okay.
guided meditation, which is a listening entertainment
Okay.
and really, really good if you can't sleep.
Hmm.
That is valid for group. And you could do
Okay.
group meditation. Hey, you could do group yoga classes. But the thing is, human beings have a tendency to naturally be competitive. And it's not healthy for your body to start to compete with who you're seeing peripherally. You need to shut your eyes and tune into what you're feeling. And with my first year students at the School of Wizardry, the first thing I get on them about is their sensing. Their
Hmm.
gross body sensing, sight, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, and then the super levels of those senses, because we have super sensing. Like think of a chef who can smell or hold something in their hand and know exactly how much or if it belongs or doesn't belong in
Yeah,
a
that's
restaurant.
true.
And there, and then I can't believe how many people can't smell and taste. I
Yeah.
I cannot believe it, and it just shows me their health habits. They're
Hmm.
not cleaning their sinuses, they're not practicing breathing exercises. There are many very interesting myths and stories through the yogic teachings
Wow.
about somebody wanting to be a great yoga master. And they go, remember BC Comics? In my imagination, I remember, I imagined, they're climbing up the mountain and there's this
Yeah.
pretty much naked being, sitting in a piece of cloth and they're meditating and they're expecting this great bit of knowledge and the master says just breathe, you know and
Yeah.
teach them a breathing exercise and years go by and then spontaneously what they had originally wanted to happen happens. And this is a
Mhm.
story of how energy moves in the body. We can love it, we can entertain it, we can coax it, but we have to understand it has its own path to take and we need
Right.
to clear the path, but we can't force it. So
Yeah.
personally, okay, listeners and viewers,
Hmm.
I don't see that we can force the third eye open. I just don't.
Right.
We have to clear the path of the lower chakras. Those are the ones we're here in the meat puppet, the human form.
Love that.
There was a band called the Meat Puppets when I was in art.
Really? That's hilarious.
I didn't know till later where the name came from, and then I went, oh.
That's funny though. Wow. So if people want to connect with you, obviously, like you said, you have your main website, ambikadevi.com. So they're going to be able to find like the different areas they might want to connect with you. Maybe it's,
Sure,
your
yeah,
indie.
you'll see the books, and you can link out and find them on Amazon. And two of them are in audiobook form already. I was also in a fourth book as not published by me that came out earlier this year, and I'm going to make an audio version of my piece. I wrote a feature chapter in the book. It's about the goddess. And
Cool.
I'm so excited to have the opportunity. It's in one of the Ignite books called Ignite the Modern Goddess. Yes,
Wow.
they can go to ambikadevi.com. And so if you're interested in me as a speaker or a guest for your show, I'd love it. And you can pop over to the speaking page to read and see some more about that. If you're interested in the esoteric arts and astrology and learning tarot or having a consultation, then Ambika's Wisdom will shoot off of that page. If what you want is meditation, you can certainly find me through Yogini Yoda. And then I've got something brand new happening right now that I'm super excited about, Wendy. I have changed my coaching site. I'm pivoting it, which I think pivot is probably the catchword of 2020.
Yes.
Shirts that say I pivoted in 2020. I'm pivoting my coaching site. It's not fully launched yet, so you are the first people to know about this. I'm blasting it out to all of your listeners, Wendy.
I'll put it in the comments too. So
I'm calling it Ambika's Codex.
Ooh, I like that.
Codex is like a library of stuff. And that's where I've got a brand new program, my very first digital program that you'll be able to participate in, which is called End Sleep Envy. Because my mentors, when I went to them and said, I want to make a digital product. I've been wanting to do this for years with all my curriculum, but I was overwhelmed. How the heck do I turn classroom teaching? I can Zoom teach, but I wanted something you could download and do self-guided. And they said, after back and forth and, interviewing me and talking to me about it, they said, well, tell us about what stuff you've done. I said, well, I've got a meditation podcast. Oh, okay, cool. That's good. What do you think is one of your best or most successful bits on there? And I said, well, I've got one for lucid dreaming. They said,
wow.
I said, yeah. And the lucid dreaming track on my podcast, that's Meditate with Ambika. You'll find that all on ambikadevi.com.
Okay, perfect.
That gets a lot of play on other podcasts. Like I am the most listened to on the meditation podcast, which is my friend Roy Coughlin's podcast, and also on some other paid for subscriptions. That dream track is the most popular. So they said, can you help people sleep? And I said, yeah, I definitely can. I've worked one-on-one with people doing that. They said, then make a course doing that. So I am in the finishing touches and planning to launch it this week. And then I will pull the curtain on ambikascodex.com, and End Sleep Envy is the very first course you can take there. I'm planning on putting my astrology level 1 course there. There's going to be a lot of free content from my YouTube channel, which is Ambika Devi, of course.
Sweet.
And so I want to continue giving a lot of free content and then creating more of these digital courses for people. Short and sweet, tiny bites packed with information and hacks. Like in this course that I'm telling you about for insomnia, the End Sleep Envy course, I'm telling you all the things I've tried because I'm a light sleeper. And can you imagine sleeping in dorms at an ashram?
Yeah, no.
I had to figure out so many hacks, and I'm taking you beyond earplugs, way beyond that. I'm showing you the things that I use to get into sleep or back to sleep if I might find myself awakened in the night.
Wow, that's so cool. So when you launch that, make sure you tag me on Facebook so I can share it with people who are listening too. Because that's incredible. And that's what people really look for is those, those programs and the free content and where they can link to find more and learn more. So
Yeah.
that's just phenomenal. I love it. I'm so excited that you came on my show.
Oh,
Um,
Wendy, thank you. I'm so
yeah,
thrilled. We went over a little bit, didn't we?
that's all right. And that's just it I just like to be raw and off the cuff. So when I pull the audio from this to put on my actual podcast, I don't edit. It just goes up, just as it is. This way people get exactly what everybody else heard live, and same with YouTube.
It's super cool.
Yeah,
I'm all in and happy to come back anytime if
sweet.
you want to focus on just one thing or
Sure.
something new. It's my pleasure. And I
Yeah,
hope that everybody enjoyed our conversation. It
I
was a
do too.
delight for me. What a fun time. Thank you for
Yes.
having me as a guest.
Thank you so much. And for everyone else, make sure you look into Ambika and what she does. Watch for that launch in the next week or so. I'll if she shares it and tags me, I'll share it on
Oh,
my
I
page as
will.
well.
I will. It's not an if. You're
Yeah,
in.
perfect. So
Yeah.
if you're curious, you'll be able to go out there and keep an eye on what she's up to and connect with her. Otherwise, we will see you next week right here at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ambika.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, listeners.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.